Dr. Judith Flores is going to be presenting today about the history of the St. Joseph Parish in Inalahan, so that is celebrating the 340 years anniversary. Allow me to say a few words of introduction for someone like with Dr. Cunningham. Everybody knows, but it will help for those who are less familiar or are listening from elsewhere in the world. That Dr. Judith Flores is a folklorist, a historian, a teacher, a visual artist who has lived and worked in the island of Guam since 1957. She grew up in the southern village of Inalahan and speaks fluent CHamoru. She taught secondary school art for 10 years, then served as a folklorist for the Guam Arts Council for another 10 years. She helped found Jeff Pago's Guam Only Living Museum of CHamoru Culture, serving successfully as advisor, director, and president over a 20-year period. She earned her second Master in Arts of Micronesian Studies from the University of Guam and her PhD in Arts of Oceania from the University of East Anglia in Norwich in England. She returned to teach at the University of Guam, from which she retired in 2005. She is widely recognized as a professional visual artist of batik paintings that depict Guam culture and history that can be seen in many of Guam's public buildings. We saw in the previous presentation a beautiful sample that she did specifically for the presentation of Dr. Cunningham. Her community art includes beautifying her home village of Inalahan. To say it's really a privilege for me to introduce you. Judy, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Carlos Madrid, for that nice introduction. And Larry and Cheryl, I certainly enjoyed your presentation. I'm glad to follow such an interesting presentation. I'm not sure I can do, I'm not even going to try to do poetry like Larry does. Anyway, my presentation is about celebrating St. Joseph's 340th Jubilee, telling our stories. Next slide, please. In 2018, our pastor, Father Joseph Honori, introduced the idea of the celebration that took place in 2020, and it continues through 2021, thanks to the pandemic. But under his perseverance, the committee has made necessary adjustments. We are continuing to do our Jubilee events. And one of the major productions we're doing is a publication of a commemorative book that would tell the amazing story of St. Joseph's Church. And our purpose for writing this book includes the following goals: to rekindle the spirit of faith, faithfulness, and festivity in our parish that we know is very much alive in the past, and we want to pass that on to our youth. To revive traditional practices that inform our Catholic culture. And one of the things we really want to focus on is to tell our story from the perspectives of our own parishioners. Next slide, please. Our oral histories have lasted probably longer than other villages due to several factors. The villages in the south weren't, the lands for farming were not taken by the military, and life could continue pretty much as it was before the war, after World War II. Farming and fishing continued either as a main occupation or to supplement cash jobs. Parish family celebrity events continued, and the focus remained on family and community. Stories told by the elders continued to enlighten the youth until television was introduced in the 1970s. Thank goodness we didn't have good reception in Inalahan until that time. So they listened to the stories told by the elders up until the 70s. And lastly, the traditional arts and folkways were revived in the 1970s through the first CHamoru Cultural Center in Inalahan, which was called Lancho Antiguo, located behind St. Joseph Church. Next slide, please. So there was this revival, and it extended at least the oral histories and practices, at least one other additional generation. I just wanted to show you the makeup of the commemorative book committee. It's a nice mixture of of old folks like Bill Paulino and myself, and then newly retired, middle-aged people in the parish who contributed writing and community outreach, and then several young, bright college graduates who are making their mark in the island. And so we're very, it's been a good working group. Next slide. Next slide, please. Now, what we're going to focus on is the importance of oral accounts, because Inalahan has such a rich archive of oral accounts that actually started to be recorded back in the 1970s. Bill Paulino is a major collector, and he wrote a lot in a journal, listened to his elders. So his reach went very far back in time, further back than I think most young people he was born after the war, but his reach, he had a lot of knowledge that was no longer available. So back to the importance of oral accounts. It's well known throughout Micronesia that oral histories are very precious. It is helped preserve the information on canoe building, ocean navigation, and many islands guarded their knowledge through secret language only known to practitioners of particular arts. In the Mariana Islands, oral histories were known to have persisted through the transmission of poetry, debate, and songs, such as the CHamoru that we have today. Next slide, please. And as I was running through some research papers, I ran across this that a Pacific scholar, David Hanlon, retired from the University of Hawaii, wrote in 1980 about the importance of Pacific Islander oral accounts. Recent work with oral accounts has shown them to be surprisingly detailed and consistent with written accounts of the same event. Anthropologists have long noted the strenuous efforts taken to preserve the integrity of island legends and stories. Knowledge is not cheap, especially in island societies, and it only remains for those of us from the outside to take time to listen. Next slide, please. So this is going to be the focus of this presentation. Our committee's goal is to balance the village oral accounts with scholarly research practices that help to verify oral histories. And it allows our parishioners to contribute their voices to the telling of Inalahan's story. And their stories need to be passed on to future generations to revitalize the pride and accomplishments of their ancestors and to help inspire future endeavors and historic virtues. In a world that has become so secular, these stories will help provide examples of responses grounded in faith and faithfulness, which is the theme of our Jubilee. Next slide, please. So the approach is to produce a hardcover book of about 300 pages, including archival and contemporary photos, and it will be divided into 3 main sections. First section is what Bill Paulino and myself have been working on, the history of St. Joseph Church, and then others in the committee are working on the parishioners, and we are asking help from everyone to contribute stories of former parishioners, because Inalahan people are now spread throughout the continent, actually, throughout the world. And then the third part will be the Jubilee activities that we have undertaken to date. Next page, next slide. So the main focus on this paper will be section 1, the history of St. Joseph's Church. Next slide. And what we're going to focus on is how St. Joseph became our patron saint. And my approach will be to present examples of St. Joseph history as remembered in oral accounts and verified through historical references. Next slide. So how St. Joseph became Inalahan's patron saint. This chapter in the St. Joseph Jubilee commemorative book focuses on the arrival of St. Joseph's statue to the shores of Inalahan in December of 1680. And these are the historical resources that I've found about this event. The first one, just a general reflection that Joseph Quiroga led the Spanish troops to drive people they called rebels from their villages in the hills and coastal areas. And this period, which lasted about 30 years, was called the period of the Spanish Chamorro Wars, a very difficult time for Chamorro people. And then while this was going on and clans were being destroyed and small villages destroyed, a great typhoon on November 11th, 1680, it actually lasted 2 days. It destroyed most of the island's homes and crops, and this provided the opportunity for Spanish officials and clergy to persuade the people to relocate to coastal villages where they could attend church masses regularly. And in the south, the villages that were that had people relocated to them were Umatic, Hagat, Malesso, and Inalahan. Next slide, please. The missionary documents name a few of the villages that were destroyed during battles. Villages such as Pa'a to the south of Inalahan, Tarufofo, which is Talafofo, and Pikpuk to the north, and Funa from the hills, for example, were relocated to these villages. And finally, the last source says that in December of 1680, a church was begun at Inalahan, in which many were assembled from the southern part of the island, as well as people from the settlements in the hills and on the beaches. This church was dedicated to San Jose, Esposo de la Virgen Maria. The faithful built the first church of wood frame and thatch with woven carrizo grass walls. Rebels almost immediately burned it down. The faithful of the new parish quickly rebuilt it, and that building stood until 1693, when it was destroyed by a typhoon. And we don't hear much until 1769. There was a stone church with a thatched roof. Next slide, please. Now, those were the written histories from the missionaries, the outsiders. They're rather stark. They leave a lot of unanswered questions. There's no known documentation as to how the original St. Joseph statue that graces our church even today came to our church. And when we examine this, this document that I'm going to share with you, oral accounts from the local sources are richly detailed. They tell reasons why things happened. They explain who facilitated and enabled the first church to be established. They contain concerns of the people and have responses and show responses to the situation according to cultural practices. Next slide, please. So to create the setting, what I'm going to examine with you, for you today, is the reenactment of the arrival of St. Joseph's statue to Inalahan in 1680, in December of 1680. That's when the church was founded. That's all the records say. But the oral histories have a whole story that explains this. So what we've done since 1993, we had our first reenactment. And even prior to that, in the 1970s, I had been doing, collecting oral histories in my job as folklorist. And Bill Paulino had been collecting, listening to elders, writing in his journal. And in early 1990s, when the parish council was preparing to plan for the annual St. Joseph Fiesta, Edward Crisostomo, who was a parish council member, brought up the idea of doing a reenactment of the arrival of St. Joseph. He was very familiar with the story, and several of the parish council members were familiar with that story. Our former mayor, Franklin Kaitagui, Bill Paulino was a member, and others there did remember it. So Bill Paulino was tasked with collecting or compiling these stories into a reenactment narration. So I'm going to read the narration, but just to give you the setting, the event takes place on the shores of Inalahan Bay, somewhere along the Inalahan shore coastline that you see in the distance there. And the boat that carries St. Joseph is comprised of, and we don't know the size of the boat. That wasn't, you know, they call it a ship sometimes, they call it a boat. Maybe they disembarked from a larger ship, we don't know. But they talk about the boat coming in, bringing this gift of St. Joseph. And so in the reenactment, what we've done through the years, it's been refined and adjusted, but we don't go out to the deep sea with our precious St. Joseph. It's put into a boat across the bay from Inalahan. And also in the boat is our village priest and representatives of the military of today, because it would have been the Spanish military at that time. So here you see a reenactment, our most recent reenactment in 2019, showing the boat carrying St. Joseph's statue. Next slide, please. So on the shore, the people of Inalahan gather, organized by the Christian mothers whom you see here. And this was the first reenactment in 1993. You see a very young Bill Paulino, and many of the others you see there have passed on. But this would be on the shore of probably where Gefpago was, or is now. And they are awaiting the arrival of the boat. And while they're waiting, they're singing and chanting. Next slide, please. And as we will explain in the narrative, the kulu, which is the trumpet shell, is an important indicator of to communicate to the people. So here we have a kulu blower on the left from 2019 and the first kulu blower in 1993. Next slide, please. So the oral account starts this way. Of course, it has a formal beginning and prayers and so forth, but in the interest of time, I'll go into the actual oral accounts. The reorganization by mandate of Spain forced people to be moved out of Funa to prevent more bloodshed between the Chamorro natives and the Spanish soldiers. This move was very heartbreaking and demoralizing for the Chamorro people. It was indeed heart-wrenching for them to abandon their little village and way of life in Funa. Despite their hardship, they continued to hope in God through the intercession of St. Joseph and the Blessed Lady. As soon as they were settled here in Inalahan village, they built a church in honor of St. Joseph. So here we have agency of the people themselves. The missionary report that corroborates this is from Garcia's 1683 publication. And it says the statue of St. Joseph resided in Funa in a little chapel that was built by the baptized natives with the missionary priests. Next slide, please. And the oral account, and when we say stories from our Manamko, Bill is referring to the people that he interviewed, the elders. We're told that the ship carrying the original statue of St. Joseph tried to make its way into Umatic, but it failed because the heavy wind and rain and grinding water currents did not allow entry into the bay. The ship then continued to sail to Malesso. Again, rough waters and relentless rain with typhoon force wind would not permit entrance into this area. Next slide. The ship then headed to Inalahan. Before the fishermen and other natives spotted the ship, the elders described the wind as of typhoon force and rain, smashing tree branches and knocking down trees across the village. Suddenly, these natural forces ceased and everything became calm. This allowed the ship to enter Inalahan Bay. Our elders described this as a miracle. Others described it as igrasyan zuus, or the grace of God that allowed the ship to make its way without any problem into our bay. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of our most recent reenactment, 2019, it's bringing the statue to shore. When the ship finally came to rest in the water near the shoreline, crews got off the ship and carefully took down the statue of St. Joseph. The natives chanted songs as the statue was being carried to the shore. Next slide, please. And this is a procession to the church in the first reenactment, 1993. And the story goes that many of the baptized natives processed behind the crew, carrying the statue of St. Joseph. A number of the baptized men took the lead of the procession to the church in memory of their lost village of Funa. Next slide, please. So going back to Garcia's history, it reports in detail the location of Funa, where St. Joseph's Chapel was built. And here's the description. Funa is celebrated among these natives because they point out a rock there from which they believe that all men had their origin. It is near several harbors and from one cape that points west-northwest, which rises 36 to 48 feet above the sea. One can see at a great distance the ships that sail from Nueva España to the Philippines. And a footnote says, in that book says, the rock is Lala's Rock at Chalananiti Point. And this is Fuha Bay, the rock that's in Fuha Bay. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, this narrative shows how oral accounts can often preserve details that are of importance to those telling their story. In this case, the missionary documents failed to record details that were important to local historians. Oral accounts provide answers, reasons, and details. How did the statue arrive? And why was this important? The oral accounts give agency to God and nature and to the people of Funa who had been relocated to Inalahan. Oral accounts assure that St. Joseph was destined to be our patron saint. And who is credited for facilitating the activity and why? The oral accounts give credit to the people of Funa for making St. Joseph welcome in Inalahan. Among the most prevalent themes in the oral accounts is the ancient relationship of Inalahan with the lost village of Funa. All of Bill's interviewees express these memories. Next slide, please. And what can we learn about local culture and protocol in this encounter? The narrative is very informative in the ways of island society, of discerning the intentions of unknown visitors and of broadcasting this information to their fellow islanders through the Kulu. When peaceful intentions are determined, the visitors' protocols for traditional welcome are launched. Invariably, such protocols include chants or songs of welcome and the serving of food. So this short analysis gives you an example of how we're going to approach this commemorative book. And there are many, many oral histories. And Bill and I have, I have served as editor, and I feel that my role is to take this precious knowledge that has been preserved through Bill and the elders and to put it into a consistent flow of information without changing the colloquialisms or the way people talked at that time, because his writing is very close to the way I heard elders speak as I was growing up. So we hope that you will look forward to this commemorative book. We would welcome your critical feedback and contribution of parishioner stories and photos. And of course, by purchasing this book. Submissions, especially for stories that you'd like to contribute, they may be made on our Facebook page, which is Facebook/St. Joseph Guam. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. this amazing presentation and this fascinating project that you guys are preparing and that is in the making, as you have mentioned. It's very informative, and we're now open for a 5 to 10 minute Q&A session. We have some congratulatory comments for you, Judy. And we have one of the questions from Malia Ramirez. How did the missionaries choose the site for the mission church? Is it known? Would you know?
It's not known. That's the thing, is there is nothing. It doesn't say who started the church, why they chose that site. One interesting fact is that Joseph Quiroga, laid out the streets of Inalahan at that time, and they're the same streets that exist today.
Interesting. We have another comment from Nina Peck. There are some conflicting details. The location of Una village. Do the oral history shed more light on this? The location in Agat, that is, or in the Umatag area.
This is why I really wanted to go into the description of the Funa that Garcia was describing, because another piece of information in footnotes that I have in my larger paper is that Funa seemed to be a very popular name. Futna was probably the first lady. It was related to creation. So there was a Funa village in Luta, and then there was an island that had Funa in Oroti, and then it seems like the most latest reference to Funa was this village that was in Fuha Bay. It was not in Fuha Bay. The rock was in Fuha Bay, but according to the description, Funa village overlooked that rock. It was on the northward side of that.
I see. I think you have answered one of the questions by Lisa Linda Natividad about information that you have found about Funa village. I can add to that as well. Nina Peck has made a comment that the Garcia accounts seem to indicate a location closer to Orote Peninsula. I can confirm on that as far as the early map of 1676, pointing at an undetermined rock somewhere located at the south of Daddy Beach, north of Agat, pointing this is the rock where the people believe the whole of the humankind was originated, or where they came from. We have one comment from William Ware offering or mentioning that he has two photographs of the interior and the outside of the St. Joseph Church, taken in 1944 and 1945, taken by his father, and he will be honored to share.
Thank you. There is photographs that I have, had for many years from the Weary family. So I'm not sure if I have them already, but I would welcome seeing them. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question from Malia Ramirez. Through her studies of Chamorro place names, Inalahan only occupied an area of the bay where the church is built. For example, the name place Maite. I don't know if you may want to clarify. Lavan is channeling the questions of Malia. I'm gonna let her maybe reword it a little bit so we can get it. I have in the meantime another question from Edward Leon Guerrero. I'm gonna try to read it first in Chamorro. Dankolos Josmase Tia Judy. Gumov Magov Juza Umedzak to put it Sengsung Hu. Bei Hu Fahan Bulaleplo. The question being, for those who don't want to follow my bad pronunciation of Chamorro, approximately how many oral accounts is the book based off? And do they differ significantly from each other?
That's the interesting thing, is that the way, for example, we did one at the last conference that focused on Father Dueñas. So that was a more recent history. But Bill was very adamant that certain things that happened during the war were included in that. And there's a very miraculous event that is described in that Father Dueñas episode or paper that we presented. That's also going to be in the book, and we're there's two ways I believe that we can approach the oral histories, and one is to corroborate with written histories as closely as we can, and then the other way is how many people say this. And what was interesting when Bill was collecting it, and I got the raw material, he was saying, so and so said this, and then he would repeat just almost the same thing, but somebody else said the same thing. And so he has the list of people of elders who said this happened, and they either added a little more or made it more simple, but it's very consistent.
I see. We have time for two more questions. I'm going to read them. First, I think I bypassed it before, one by Brian Fitzgerald. Were there any particular family surnames in Inalahan associated with the Fuuna village families? Would you know?
That, to my knowledge, I don't know who were the people from Fuuna. And I did just clarify with Bill today, because I wanted to know where they put the Fuuna people when they were relocated here. And then later, 19 years later, the Ghani people were put in Inalahan. So you can imagine the upheavals and the adjustments people had to make with those additions of people. According to Bill and his wife Mary, the Fuuna people, as well as the Ghani people later, were put outside the village. And I'm sure they married into the villagers eventually and became part of the village. But they were located to the south of Inalahan, about where the Iha subdivision is now. Should be overlooking the village. And then the Ghani people, apparently, according to oral histories, were even further south, almost to the Maleso boundary.
Interesting. The previous question that we had on that is from Jesse Chargolaf. Si Jus Maaset, Auto Inalahan Loque. What is the part of the rebels who burned down the church in this endeavor and narrative? How will Quiroga be commemorated?
You know what I find interesting about Bill's writing, and of course, he's a very devoted member of our parish. He's been music director for 50 years at least. And according to, the way the elders told the stories, they were very forgiving. They quoted a lot of scripture, and they said, I remember one growing up, you can never forget, but you can forgive. And that was a very common saying. So the people of Inalahan have always been very welcoming and gentle and loving. And it shows in the writings.
How true. Thank you. I'm going to say the last question, going back to the follow-up question of Malia Ramirez. Has your research done the traditional place names surrounding Inalahan, like, for example, Mighty place near Inalahan?
Yes, I've done that somewhat in my book. There are a lot more place names surviving in Inalahan than the previous presentation that talked about place names. Yes, of course, Gara's Cave is Tagamin Lagu area or Tagami area, and then Mighty is further up the hill, and then we have Pekka, and all of these things are referred to in the oral accounts.
I remember, in fact, now that you mentioned, you and I talking about the Sumay near, going towards Maleso, right? In the south of Inalahan, and more going towards Maleso, a place name of Sumay. No?
Probably because it was very wet
Right. Okay, I think I'm not mentioning the multiple messages of congratulations and gratitude for your presentation, Dr. Judith Flores. Thank you so much. This is most interesting, and we will look forward for this commemorative book.